The tree you just planted is probably already dying, and it has nothing to do with water or sunlight. If you've ever planted a tree, watched it for a season or two, and then watched it slowly start to struggle, despite doing everything that felt right, this is why. Look, the failure almost never comes from the care you give after planting. It almost always comes from what happened in the first hour, before the tree ever touched the ground. This video covers the exact steps to plant a container tree correctly, including the stuff almost nobody does, and that makes all the difference between a tree that thrives and one that quietly dies. The biggest mistake most people make happens before the tree even touches the ground, and it comes pre-packaged with almost every tree sold at a nursery. When a tree is grown in a container for too long, its roots don't stop growing just because they've run out of space. I mean, they just keep going. They start wrapping around the inside of the pot, circling, coiling, doubling back on themselves. And here's where it gets bad. If you plant that tree without fixing those roots, they keep growing in exactly the same pattern underground. Over time, those encircling roots wrap tighter and tighter around the base of the trunk, slowly cutting off the flow of water and nutrients. Eventually, the tree chokes itself out. It doesn't happen in one season. It takes years, which is exactly why most people never connect the cause to the collapse. By the time the tree shows real symptoms, those roots have been strangling it for a long time already. Knowing what to look for actually helps here. When you pull a container tree out and the root ball holds a perfectly cylindrical shape, smooth sides, barely any roots visible, that's a warning sign, not a good sign. A healthy root ball should break apart slightly and show roots going outward in different directions. The tighter and more spiral the pattern, the more work you need to do before planting. The fix is to expose those roots and redirect them. Pull the wrapping roots outward by hand. If they won't come free, use a knife and make radial cuts, slicing away from the centre, not in circles around it. The goal is to get those roots growing outward from the trunk, not around it. This one step alone dramatically changes the long-term survival odds of any container-grown tree. Fixing the roots gives the tree a real shot. But there's a second mistake, quieter, just as deadly, that happens at the exact moment you set the tree in the hole. Every tree has what's called a root flare, the zone where the trunk starts to widen and transition into the root system. On a well-planted tree, that flare is visible above the soil surface. It looks like the base of the trunk is spreading outward. If you can't see it, the tree is buried too deep. And a buried root flare, is one of the most reliable early signs that a tree is going to struggle. Planting too deep restricts oxygen around the root zone and keeps the base of the trunk in a constantly moist environment. That moisture invites fungal rot, disease, and infection. Here's what makes this frustrating. Many container trees arrive from nurseries with the root flare already buried several inches below the surface of the growing medium. So even when you plant at what looks like the right depth, you might still be burying the flare without realizing it. That's just how it is. Before anything goes in the ground, find the root flare. Clear away whatever's covering it. When the tree is sitting in the hole, that flare should be at or just slightly above the finished soil level. Not buried, visible. Get that right before you move on to anything else. Now that you know where the root flare needs to sit, the next question is the shape of the hole. And almost everyone gets this completely backwards. The instinct is to dig a hole just big enough to fit the root ball. Makes sense, right? Wrong. Tree roots don't grow downward. They grow outward. They spread through the upper layers of soil, searching for oxygen and nutrients. When you drop a tree into a snug hole, surrounded by dense, undisturbed ground, those roots hit a wall. They can't push through compacted soil, so they loop back on themselves, stay trapped, and the tree never truly gets established. It just survives on borrowed time. The hole should be 3 times the width of the root ball. Not deeper, wider. Depth only needs to go far enough to position the root flare correctly. Everything beyond that is horizontal. A wide planting zone gives the roots loose, workable soil to spread into during those first critical seasons. Here's something that throws people off about depth specifically. Deeper is not more stable. Stability comes from lateral root spread, not from how far down the root ball sits. A hole that's too deep just piles soil on top of the roots, blocking oxygen and compressing the system you're trying to support. Dig wide, stay shallow. Those 4 words are worth remembering before you ever pick up a shovel. Once the hole is the right shape, what you refill it with matters just as much, especially when the native soil is already working against you. In a lot of planting sites, the native soil is heavily compacted clay, dense, poorly draining, and basically hostile to root development. Dropping a tree directly into that without any amendment is kind of asking for slow failure. Mixing in a quality soil blend or coarse gravel helps create pockets of air and better drainage. This gives roots the oxygen access they need and stops water from pooling around the root zone and suffocating everything from below. That said, soil amendment isn't always necessary. If the native soil is already reasonably loose and well draining, heavy amendment can actually cause a different problem. The roots tend to stay within the enriched zone rather than pushing outward into the surrounding native ground. Basically recreating the container effect underground, which is the exact thing you were trying to escape. Improve conditions enough to encourage healthy establishment. That's all. Don't build a perfect little island that the roots never want to leave. Once everything is in the ground, most people walk away and wait. And look, that's actually a mistake. What happens in the next few months matters just as much as every step before it. Newly planted trees go through real stress. Think about it. The root system has been exposed, manipulated and redirected. The environment is unfamiliar. The soil temperature is different. All of this is happening at once. During the planting process itself, keep the root ball consistently moist, not waterlogged, but never dry. Letting it dry out at any point during planting just adds stress on top of stress to a system that's already struggling. After the tree is in the ground, plan on watering at least 3 times a week through the growing season. That might feel like a lot. It's not. The tree is consuming water faster than it can absorb it because its roots haven't made proper contact with the surrounding soil yet. As new growth starts appearing and the tree looks settled, you can start tapering off. Let the tree tell you when it's ready. In those early months, always err toward more water rather than less. There's one last step that separates a properly finished planting from one that slowly works against itself. And most people skip it or get it completely wrong. Mulch does real work for a newly planted tree. It insulates the root zone against extreme temperatures. It holds moisture during dry stretches. It creates a physical barrier between the roots and foot traffic, lawn equipment and all the things that compact soil over time. And as it breaks down, it improves the soil with organic matter that supports long-term root health. I mean, it's a lot of benefit for something most people just throw on without thinking. But mulch applied wrong creates new problems. Piling it high against the trunk, what's sometimes called a mulch volcano, keeps the base of the tree permanently moist and creates the same rot conditions as planting too deep. Keep the mulch ring completely clear of the trunk. Spread it outward, 2 to 3 inches thick, away from the base rather than up against it. And finally, do not pack down the soil around the tree to hold it in place. I mean, compacting that soil restricts the root development you've spent all this time protecting. Instead, use stakes and flexible wire ties for the first growing season. Once the tree is established, take the supports off. A tree that develops without a crutch holds itself better in the long run, than one that never had to learn. Most tree failures trace back to decisions made on planting day. Quiet choices that looked fine at the time and only showed up as problems years later. These steps aren't complicated. Anyone can do them. And now you know all of them. If this helped you out, drop a comment below. Let me know which of these mistakes you've been making, because I'm willing to bet it's at least one of them. And if you want to see more stuff like this, subscribe. There's a lot more coming and you don't want to miss it.